of your screen share. Here we go. And go ahead and get started. Do we see my slide okay? Excellent.
Yes, and I like to suggest to people, you do know that you can make the slide bigger or smaller with the bar in the middle. You also, and I'm sorry I didn't go over this at the beginning, you also can make comments in the chat box, and we have a Q&A for questions which we'll mostly take at the end. Thank you.
Okay. Great, Stair. Well, again, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm happy to start off and then be followed by my board member, Ruth Amundsen. Just to clarify before we get started, the title of the presentation was How a Mother and Son Changed Our Energy System. So I'm going to be talking about my boss, Anya, and how she changed the energy system with her son. But just to be clear, I am not her son, nor am I Ruth's son, although my mother does have solar panels on her home in New Mexico. So who is Solar United Neighbors? Well, we are a nonprofit organization that helps communities go solar, join together, and fight for energy rights. And I'm going to talk about how we got started, what we can, or what you can do to engage with us, and then give a little bit of a basic solar primer. So Solar United Neighbors is actually an organization that got started by accident. In fact, my boss, I'll take it back to the previous screen, that's her pictured on the top right-hand corner. Her name is Anya Schoolman. And she saw the movie Inconvenient Truth with her son Walter, who's pictured on the left, and his friend Diego. And they were so motivated to act by the movie, to take action, that they decided the most actionable thing to do would be to go solar on their row house in the Mount Pleasant neighborhood of Washington, D.C. And when they decided to do it, they found the process to be really challenging. In fact, it was more than 3 times the cost of what it is to go solar then as it is now. And they got a lot of conflicting information, didn't know how to compare apples to apples when it came to looking at the bids and the components and everything. And so Anya thought she was being a smart mother in saying, well, if it's so challenging to do this on our whole house or our own house, why don't we take the whole neighborhood solar? And that's actually kind of what she did. In fact, she underestimated her son's ability for community organizing because he turned it into a project, a school and a project for his synagogue. So what he did was put, along with his friend Diego, put flyers on all of the doorsteps in Mount Pleasant, basically saying if it were roughly the same cost or a little bit more expensive to go solar, would you want to go solar as part of this group? Figure it out, leverage our economics of scale, and form a cooperative, basically a loose-knit group that figures it out on their own. And that is essentially what she did. After a couple months, they found they had about 100 people interested in their neighborhood. So they formed the Mount Pleasant Solar Cooperative. And after about 2 years, she took 45 people solar in the Mount Pleasant neighborhood of DC. And so Solar United Neighbors, which we were at the time known as Community Power Network, literally just started as a desire for other people to replicate that success story. Anya had folks reaching out to her from other neighborhoods in Washington, D.C. She got some national press as well from other people in other states that were curious as how they could do that in their own neighborhoods or their own states. So we really, as an organization, started out with Anya working in her house, moonlighting just as with a couple volunteers helping people go solar. And to kind of fast forward, I'll tell you what we're doing right now and kind of the specifics of our program. But it's pretty amazing what we are accomplishing right now and that we have pretty lofty goals. A clean, equitable energy system that directs control and benefits back to local communities. So, and that is a two-way participatory system. So what does that mean? In the past, utility customers, electric customers have really been programmed to be passive consumers of energy. And now with solar, you actually have a unique enabling technology that allows people to now participate in their energy system, become energy generators with rooftop solar panels on their house. And really kind of similar to the way the cell phones or internet has changed communications, that's what solar is. It also allows all communities and demographics to have a stake in energy, in the energy system, especially now with all of the upheaval. What we've seen is low income communities of different racial demographics have typically borne the cost of our energy system. They've borne the cost in energy generation or extraction. And so what we're doing now is turning that on its end, allowing all of these communities to participate, have a stake, and ultimately benefit from solar and the energy transition. And lastly, we're helping to represent solar owners as a constituency. So going on to the next slide, what Solar United Neighbors represents is a constituency of solar owners or prospective solar owners. So even though a lot of us, including myself, are environmentalists, our organization is actually not an environmental organization per se, but one that represents the interests of people that have solar or want to go solar or want to have a stake in our energy transition. We divide our work into 3 different areas. We have our Go Solar programs, which I'll talk about, joining together and fighting for energy rights. So our theory of change is very circular. We help people go solar, adopt the technology, help them join together or connect with other members of the movement, and ultimately fight for energy rights, things related to the practical barriers for solar. And since we started officially in 2007, our organization has installed more than 4,700 installations in the 12 states we work. That's 35 megawatts, which is an industrial scale of solar on individual rooftops. Here in Virginia, since we started in 2014, we've installed about 6.5 megawatts, getting close to about 900 installations, and have grown a list of about 10,000 supporters. So that's what we do as an organization as a whole. And we really focus, again, our work into 3 areas. And the first area is Go Solar. So that essentially helps people adopt the technology. Our credo is that we're not here to help you with the why, the reason why to go solar, but it's to help you with the how. And it's to address some of those practical barriers that Anya faced when she was first trying to do so in 2007. So we do divide our work into solar co-ops, sometimes called Solarize. Solar United Neighbors helped bring the first Solarize program to Virginia. That was in 2014 in Blacksburg. So now we brand our bulk purchase programs as solar co-ops. Think of them as a loose-knit buying group that helps to address some of the barriers to cost and then education that helps or that holds back a lot of people from going solar. Again, we're as an organization positioned to provide the tools to help the consumer make an informed, supported decision. So we see it, solar is a big ticket item. So you should have all of the resources and tools for you as a solar owner or business, solar prospective business adopter with solar to make that informed decision. Right now we have the Arlington Solar EV Charger Co-op. So if you're interested and you live in the greater Northern Virginia area, it's Fairfax, Arlington, of course, Alexandria. That's a bulk purchase project that's currently open, and I'll give you the link to join in another slide. So that's our solar co-ops. We've done about 35 of them in Virginia. So we've done all the way from Arlington to Abingdon to Virginia Beach to the Valley. We've done them all over. The other way that we help communities go solar is through our membership program. So maybe the solar co-op, which has a concentric geographic area and has a specific time frame, may not be a good fit. But you can join to be a member with us, and that would be helping you go solar, get a new system, or help with an existing system. Part of what we do is might help people get reviewed 3 different proposals from installers, and again, give them the tools and the support to help make that decision. Or you may be a somebody that has an existing solar system and you need help with maintenance or just some additional support, or you want to join the movement. So that is available to membership. And of course, solar is a unique technology, as I mentioned before, but what we've seen is that people that have solar are now interested in electric vehicles, and EV owners also want solar. So we've included an electric vehicle charger component as part of our solar co-ops, and we're starting to see more adoption of battery storage. So the join together aspect of our work really focuses on connecting solar owners with other solar owners. And we do that in a couple different ways. So we've partnered on the National Solar Tour with an organization called ACES. And that allows people with solar systems to open up their house, give people tours. Ruth has been a participant of that. And it's really helpful because we've seen that in our work, people that go solar actually become solar evangelists. So by them opening up their houses and telling their experience about going solar will help others adopt the technology as well. Solar happy hours, one thing that I'm very proud of in Virginia, we're known as having the most solar happy hours of all of the 12 states we work. So it gets people in the same room, sharing their experience and helping folks connect. Now, in the times of COVID, we're doing a lot of virtual events, including film screenings, education seminars on battery storage and ways to advocate. Another part or aspect of our Join Together is providing practical solar guides. So how to deal with a HOA, a homeowners association, battery storage. We're going to be soon issuing a solar owner's guide for folks with existing systems. So providing practical resources for folks that want to go solar or that have solar. And then lastly, I have a state listserv. So every state that we work in has a Google group where you can get access to really online, robust discussions where we have installers, solar owners, everybody participates. And of course, the idea is to connect, and that the movement really helps other people. People that have systems are really excited to help other people. And then the last aspect of our work is that fighting for energy rights. So as I mentioned before, Solar United Neighbors is unique in that we represent a constituency of solar owners and prospective solar owners. So we're not an environmental group or we're not an industry group, but we uniquely represent this constituency. So we focus on nonpartisan, practical barriers to solar. We work on the national and local level. So most of what affects the rules for solar is made on the state level, but we also operate on the national level too. So we have a campaign now to protect net metering from a national organization that's trying to protect that. And I'll talk about net metering here in a second. So work on both of those levels. At the end of the day, we put butts in seats. What does that mean? It means if there is a hearing or if there's something that needs people to show up, Solar United Neighbors, our partners, our constituency is really motivated to show up. And that's effective. I think we win, actually. We have a pretty good track record of success from mobilizing this constituency. For example, last legislative session here in Virginia, we passed legislation making it harder for homeowners associations to impose unreasonable restrictions on solar in their communities. VCAE is a Virginia Clean Economy Act, so we helped pass that, which expands access to solar. We were a partner with industry and environmental groups. Solar Freedom, which also addresses some of the barriers to solar. And we really fight to protect things like net metering. We passed community solar in DC. And in all of the states that we work, we really activate that network to focus on practical barriers. And most of our resistance comes from monopoly utilities. So we get people out there that are everyday average folks that can speak to the benefits of solar. Last slide on the general overview, and then we'll go into a little bit about how solar works to get you ready for Ruth's presentation. Ways to engage with us. So depending on who you are, you might have a couple different interests or ways that you would want to get involved. The good thing is that no matter who you are, there's a way that you can become engaged with us as an organization. On the left, if you are interested in going solar as part of our solar co-op or our bulk purchase projects, we have the Arlington EV Solar Co-op. As I mentioned, you can find that online, or you can reach out to us and we can give you the link. And that is actively taking members. Right now we have about 68 members. We've just issued our request for proposal and getting ready to select the installer. But those groups are free to join, and you get a bulk purchase discount, and you get support before, during, and after you go solar. But you may want to just become a member or a supporter. Say you live in an area where there is not an active co-op. So you could be a member, go solar. You could get support going solar or getting help with a new or existing system. Or maybe you just aren't in a position right now where you can go solar, but you do want to join together, be part of the movement. Well, that's part of what we are able to offer you. Maybe you want to attend a solar tour or some of our happy hours here. Or maybe you're just involved or interested in advocating for energy rights. But all of those are ways that you can get involved with us. And again, just reach out to us on our website, sign up for our newsletter, and ways that you can become a member. So I'm going to move on to the basics of solar, give you a little bit of an information session. When we speak of solar, we're all coming at it from kind of different areas or levels of experience. So I'm going to start from the basic. When we're talking about solar panels or solar energy, you can divide the sun, or you can divide the technology into two ways to harness the sun's energy. The sun is basically a big nuclear reactor up there, and you can harness its energy two ways. Down on the bottom, you can harness the heat of the sun. This is known as solar thermal. For solar hot water, for example, using hot water for bathing or heating air actually is known as passive solar. That's a great technology. But our organization really focuses on the other way to harness the energy of the sun, and that's solar photovoltaic, or PV. And that's converting the sun's light into electricity. In fact, photovoltaic is just a combination of two words. Photo meaning light, voltaic, voltage. And you could think of solar as a generator with no moving parts, a free source of fuel, and basically a 25-year plus maintenance span with very little maintenance. The most obvious components as we break down the system components are the panels. Panels are about 3.5 by 5.5 feet long. They're measured in wattage, kind of like the old incandescent light bulbs. If you bought a 50-watt light bulb, that would consume 50 watts at any given moment. Well, panels are measured in what they're able to produce at any given moment. So you might have a 300-watt panel, which may produce 300 watts of power. Very rarely would you have just one panel. They're typically grouped into what's called a solar array that are measured in 1,000-watt increments known as kilowatts. So if you have 4 250-watt panels, 4 times 250 is 1,000 watts, or a 1 kilowatt system. So just some basic vocabulary here. Again, your system is a series of components. So you have your panels, and you're going to have a racking system depending on what type of roof you have. So we have an asphalt shingle roof pictured here. You might have a membrane, TPO flat membrane roof, or a standing seam metal roof, but you're going to have a racking system that's going to be able to accommodate that. And solar can be placed on pretty much every roof. The exception is if you have a slate roof, those are a little bit more challenging to install on. So you have your panels, your racking system, and then you have your inverter. Your panels produce direct current electricity. Well, your inverter conditions the power so that it can be used, because your home or business uses alternating current, or AC. So the inverter takes the direct current, the DC, and converts it into AC. And there's a couple different types of technologies. That's a string inverter. You might have a micro inverter or an optimizer system, but it essentially does the same thing. So just to give you kind of an overview of the technology, some of the terminology, With solar, your system size is measured in kilowatts. So the example there is a 3 kilowatt system. If you had 12 250 watt panels, 12 times 250 is 3,000 watts, or a 3 kilowatt system. Your system size, again, is always measured in kilowatts, kind of like saying I have a generator that is X horsepower. That's what you're talking about when you're talking about kilowatts. Well, your electricity production is actually measured in kilowatt hours. So the electricity production in kilowatt hours depends on the size of the system in kilowatts, the way that it's oriented, if it has shading or not. And the good news is that an installer is going to be able to tell you exactly what a system on your particular roof is going to produce. Most homeowners install anywhere between about a 3 kilowatt to a 12 kilowatt system. And my favorite question, probably the one that I get the most, and you might be thinking this right now, is, well, I've got a 2,000 square foot home. What size system do I need and how much is it going to cost? And that's actually a question that's really hard to answer, because I don't know what your consumption is. The first thing that an installer is going to do is they're going to ask for a copy of your utility bill, which has a history of your electricity consumption over the last 12 months. So they're going to see how much you consume with electricity on your site. And then they're going to see how much they can fit on your roof. And with solar, you actually don't have to produce all or nothing. And we'll talk about that here in a sec. A majority of the systems out there, about 99% of them, are grid tied. So they tie into the utility grid. If you follow the schematic, number one, your solar panel converts the sunlight to direct current electricity. Number two, your inverter conditions that power. It converts the electricity from DC to AC. And then your home takes the power and uses it instantaneously. So if you have solar panels on your roof right now on a nice sunny day here in Virginia, that electricity is being produced and being consumed instantaneously by whatever's using power at the time. Could be a computer, lights, or air conditioning. Well, with a purely grid-tied system, you don't have batteries for storage. So what happens if you are consuming, or if you have power being produced during the summer, you're on vacation for a couple weeks, nothing is turned on in your house, no batteries? Well, with the grid-tied system, you're actually spinning your meter backwards, and you're building up a credit from the power that you produce but don't use at the time. And it kind of works like rollover minutes used to do when cell phones did that. So you may build up a certain surplus of energy during certain times of the day or during certain times of the season, and then that is applied to whatever you consume at night or during periods of low production. And this is a terminology that's really important. It's called net metering. So you always think of sizing a system based on your annual billing cycle. Electricity or production from solar is kind of hard to predict day to day, but you can predict it very accurately during the course of the year. So a solar system on your home or business, you might have daily or seasonal surpluses. It's going to produce a percentage of your annual offset. So with solar, you don't have to go all or nothing. You can have a system that produces 30% or 50%, all the way up to about 100% of your annual energy usage. And you get a full credit, a one-to-one retail credit. So the energy that you produce, you're going to get that full credit for the kilowatt hour of unit of electricity. A couple more slides and then I'll turn it over. The disadvantage of a purely grid-tied system, however, is if you don't have batteries and the grid goes out, your panels are not going to work. And this is counterintuitive to a lot of people, and it's a safety issue. If you've got your solar system working and the utility has linemen out there working on the grid, working on the lines, that's a safety issue. So if you have a purely grid-tied system, when in the event of an outage, you're not going to have power for safety concerns. So a lot of people are adopting solar plus battery storage. So it gives the best of both worlds. It allows you to have that grid-tied system during normal operations and then have a backup power kind of working like a generator when the grid is out. A couple reasons why: if you have frequent utility outages, you might have the need for battery storage. You might also have critical energy needs like a well pump, medical equipment, or things, power needs that you can't do without. In the bigger picture, emergency or disaster preparedness, and then advanced utility rates, which you might have variable pricing based on the time of day. So all of our co-ops and Go Solar programs do allow for battery storage. I think I've got one last slide, and then I'm going to turn it over to Ruth and be happy to take any additional questions at the end of the presentation. What makes a good site for solar? So what we do when somebody joins our co-ops, one of the first things we do besides welcoming them is decide or help assess their roof or their property for solar. So a couple considerations. Which way does the roof or the best orientation for solar face? Typically, south facing is the best. We're in the northern hemisphere. As you face into the south, you're facing into the equator. But if you have an east or a west facing roof, you could also go solar. Chances are your roof is probably going to be somewhere in the middle. What you don't want is a north facing roof. When you're facing north, you're facing away from the equator, and it's really going to diminish the production. So we're looking at which way your roof or the best orientation for solar faces. Also, shading. So the sun is at different angles during certain times of the day or the season. So we're looking to make sure that you don't have trees or any obstructions that are going to be shading those panels. Also, do you have enough space to mount panels? So the panels themselves are 3.5 by 5.5 feet long. So you're going to want to have at least 200 square feet of unobstructed roof space. So here in Virginia, we have those beautiful Cape Cods with dormers, and we see gables. Well, you really need that smooth roof surface in order to accommodate those panels. So just a rule of thumb, you need about 200 square feet of flat roof space at least that doesn't face north and it isn't substantially shaded. And lastly, how much roof life do you have left on your roof? The panels themselves are about a 25-year plus lifespan. So what you want to avoid is having to replace the roof with the panels on them, because that would mean uninstalling the panels, storing them, and reinstall them. So we'd like to say if your roof has less than 10 years of life left back on it, then you probably you're going to want to go solar either at the same time you replace your roof or afterwards. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ruth, and she could speak a little bit about her experience. And again, happy to ask or answer any questions at the end. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Aaron. Can everybody hear me? Aaron, can you hear me? Great. So I'm going to talk a little bit just about actions we've taken at home and some of the things that that's led to. Three of the biggest things we've done in our home is putting in a green roof and putting in solar hot water and solar PV. We put in that about 11 years ago, and ever since then, our home has been on the local solar tour in Hampton Roads. We're in Norfolk. And I've been on Aaron's board from the beginning of the Solar United Neighbors, and like to help out with the co-ops and present at conferences and workshops. I think it's really important for someone who's thinking about solar to hear about the experience from the side of the homeowner, not from an installer or someone who's trying to sell them something. And so I really enjoy being on the solar tour. We get a lot of good questions from people that come by, and I think that's an important way for people to get the comfort level with going solar. And I really like Aaron's organization for starting up those co-ops, because I think that what we need is neighborhoods as a whole going solar. It's a lot more effective than homeowners onesie twosie deciding to do it and having to fight through all the issues themselves. I think we're going to have a lot more effective application of solar if people can join co-ops and have their whole neighborhood do it at once. A couple other things we have in our house, we have a 3,000-gallon rainwater cistern, overflow, permeable pavers. We're right on the water, so trying to help our runoff, we have a wetlands buffer and permeable pavers, and we do composting. Just a couple examples. So after we had put solar on our house, sort of looking for what else could we do with solar. Our kids went to a school called Norfolk Academy, and I got a group of parents together who all were advocates of solar. And our group put $1 million of solar on the school at no cost to the school and no effective cost to the parents. We all get our money back in 7 years. And a lot of private schools have been interested in this method since we did it, and gotten a lot of interest from Hampton Road schools in doing it. There's an organization called Generation 180 that has a really nice report on how to take your school solar. But this was a really heartwarming thing for me to be able to stand on that roof with my kids and look at all the solar panels that we had gotten parents to put up. This is sort of a real quick snapshot of how this works. If you imagine that whole pie being the cost of something like that $1 million solar install, our parents formed an LLC, which let us take the tax benefits. The problem with putting solar on a nonprofit is a nonprofit isn't paying taxes, so they can't take the tax credits. So we, as parents, got the 26%, or we actually installed earlier, so we got a 30% tax credit, plus we got about a 30% savings on our tax bill by taking depreciation. So we finished install in December of 2018, and all the parents got 60% of their money back 4 months later when we filed taxes. And then we make the rest of the money back over 7 years with the annual income from solar. As Erin said, this is a net metered system. So the school is making money on the solar, and they're basically passing that money through to the parents to pay them back for the system. And that works for any kind of nonprofit, church, museum, school, etc. So after I did that, somebody pointed out that there was a new federal program called Qualified Opportunity Zones. And this is a federal program that designates low-income neighborhoods and makes investing in them advantageous for the investor. And it was, in my opinion, at least a small attempt to heal some of the inequities in our nation. And the blue areas in this are areas in Hampton Roads that are designated as Qualified Opportunity Zones. So I started a fund that's called Norfolk Solar Qualified Opportunity Zone Fund, sort of a mouthful. And what that does is install solar in these qualified opportunity zones at no cost to the businesses. So it has the same financial scheme as we used at Norfolk Academy, where the funders are getting the tax credit, the solar tax credit, that's a federal tax credit, as well as depreciation. They're also getting the benefit from the Qualified Opportunity Zone program, which is that you can defer taxes and get a discount on your taxes on capital gains. Those are just some pictures of some of the places that we've installed solar. I started this fund in 2019. It's about $750,000. We have done 5 solar systems in the Qualified Opportunity Zones, and we have 2 that are underway. Another thing that I'm really proud of with this program is that when we wrote the RFP for the installer, we required that they hire and train Opportunity Zone residents who would work on these installs and become permanent employees of the installer. And I've lived here in Hampton Roads for 30 years. And as far as I know, those 4 Opportunity Zone residents that we've hired and trained is the first time we've had installers of color in Hampton Roads ever. So when we're done, we'll have about 1,200 solar panels up, about 420 kilowatts, and we will have avoided 370 tons of CO2 production. We've gotten a couple of awards, and we work with a lot of the local environmental and social justice groups. These are just some shots of some of the installs that we've done. Top right is a African-American church called First Baptist Berkeley. I really like that because it's a very visible solar array as the folks are walking into the church. And we got a lot of press based on doing this. And there was an investor in New York who found us online and was fascinated enough to completely duplicate the structure and is asking for our help to install it. So I formed a small woman-owned business with Alden Cleanthes here in Hampton Roads. And we are working with this Rancho Solar, and we're gonna install another $750,000 in solar, hopefully all this year. We have, we're working with Norfolk State. They have a lot of buildings that would work really well for solar. So we're looking at doing one building as a pilot where we would sort of demonstrate to them that this could work. And then we're going to hire and train additional Opportunity Zone residents, possibly even Norfolk State students that would also work on these installations. So past that, we're hoping to start a bigger fund that would take on larger investors. It would be the same structure as these other two, but it would be able to take on commercial investors that have large Opportunity Zone funds. We've identified at least 150 million of sites in Hampton Roads that we could put solar on. And if we were able to do all that and get the investors for it, it could lead to hundreds of clean energy jobs in those Opportunity Zones that would help this area. And we're hoping that if we do stand up this larger fund, that this could be duplicated all across the country. There's Opportunity Zones all across the country, and the financing works just the same in other areas. In fact, it works better in other states where there's additional state benefits, state financial benefits, and credits for putting in solar, which we don't have right now in Virginia. So our goals for this larger fund, first of all, is an equitable energy future where we're helping the businesses and churches that are in these low-income areas pay their utility bills. We're helping out the investors. We're giving them a dependable return. It's not a large return. We're not trying to profit off these low-income areas. We're doing the workforce development, so giving on-the-job training and good jobs in a burgeoning field to these at-risk communities, I think, is really valuable. And then just the community resiliency piece. It helps stabilize the grid. It gives these areas clean power. A lot of times the low-income areas are where problematic fossil fuel infrastructure is positioned, and so it's giving them a way to make their own power and to possibly avoid the fossil fuel installations that are harmful. Lets them diversify their energy sources. You can, as Erin said, do battery for some of these, so you could have resilient, say, shelters where you'd have a battery system with the solar, and that way the community would have a shelter to go to that would have power in the case of a power outage. So call to action, what can you do? Erin gave a lot of the examples of what you can do. You can install your own solar. You can join Solar United Neighbors. You can put solar on a nonprofit and get your money back in 8 years. You can form an LLC of a bunch of people, same thing, and solarize any kind of nonprofit. Doing that requires something called passive income. And so if you know somebody that has a lot of passive income, they could do this. You can loan money to an installer and let them put in the solar and take a small percentage, but better than they would get at a bank. I didn't go into this, but there's a lot of ways for cities and schools to install solar on municipal buildings with an RFP, and any school, any city building can get solar installed at no cost from most installers, and it's just a little bit longer payoff period than what I've described here, but it's really a win-win. There's no reason for cities and school boards not to do it. You can ask your city to implement CPACE, which is a way to get commercial financing for putting in solar. I think the listserv that Erin described is really, really valuable. That's what I'm calling here the Google group discussion. It's a great place because people from all over will enter just completely random questions. Why isn't my inverter working? Why don't I understand my readings? How do I deal with my local community like HRA? And the whole community comes together to answer it and gives people links. And I think it's a really interesting discussion. And then if you know investors that want to invest in solar, doing something similar to what we've done and putting solar in QOZs has been really a really wonderful experience for me. So that's the email for the QOZ fund I run and the website for it if you want to contact me. And I believe we're also going to put handouts and slides in the chat if people want to put in questions or have copies of those documents. And that's all I got.
Thank you, Ruth. Thank you, Erin. Very, very interesting. I don't see any questions popping up yet. I have some of my own. I think so. Battery storage if you don't have much solar availability, much roof or anything, would it be useful to just hook up simply to a battery and kind of just keep it sort of simple like that? Would that be one way to approach not having much good solar exposure? And then I also wanted to, like, how we can call and get someone to come over and take a look and see if we have enough. So that's an option, right?
Sure.
And
Oh, go ahead.
yeah, and then just like I was just also trying to see about, like, if you had a little part of your yard, say, that was open, where you could, you know, put a random panel out in the middle of your yard. Is that very helpful? And I'd also love to hear from Ruth a little bit more about the grass roof. So.
Yeah, I could go ahead and get started with the battery. So Stare, you were asking if if you don't have a good roof for solar, would it be a good idea just to get a battery for backup? Is that correct?
Yeah, something like this, or could I maybe just have one panel in a random place in my yard that I could use for my car, say?
Yeah.
Something like this.
You know, typically with solar, you have to really look at your needs. So the value of a battery would be if you have frequent utility outages, or as I mentioned before, if you've got some things, like a lot of people do have like medical equipment or like a well pump that they just can't afford to go without, even if it's for, you know, an hour or two or whatever. That would be the value proposition. Typically, we don't recommend, if you don't have a good roof for solar, it's usually not helpful to just do one or two panels in one spot, because a lot of the cost of a solar installation is what's called soft costs. So just for an installer to roll a truck to install one panel or to hook up the inverter to a service panel is going to require just a fixed amount of costs. So, you know, unfortunately, you know, if you don't have a good roof, there are other options. In Virginia, we are starting to get community solar, which means that you might be able to, in the future, as the laws get better, put in or proportionally invest in a off-site solar system in which you might get a proportional benefit, whether financially or a credit of energy on your bill. We're still not quite at that point. If you look at Maryland and DC as good examples, but that could be an option. And then, you know, on the yard, it really depends on the neighborhood in where you live. Again, it's, you know, a lot of local suburban jurisdictions do have some pretty tight rules about putting a ground mounted system in your front yard. It might be challenging, but there are certain things. What I also say too is we're getting a lot into electric vehicles. And so what we recommend is if somebody doesn't have a good fit roof for solar, buy an electric vehicle. I mean, that's a great way to make a you know, environmental impact. There's also energy efficiency as well. So, you know, hopefully that gives you a little bit of a start. And
okay, so, and I wanted to, so what about, I have an electric boat that works on batteries that we charge, and it does get sun. So you can have a couple of panels or one panel even to charge up a series of batteries, of car batteries.
You could. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's smaller kind of what are called off-grid kits where you might have mm-hmm. a couple 100 watts of panels that you could put into a battery. So I think that could also be an option as well.
Okay. Well, thank you. And Ruth, I'm so inspired with what you've been doing with the zones, the QOZ zones. That's great. But I was also really just curious about your grass roof.
All right, I'm just going to pop up real quick a couple pictures. I'd also, just to add on to what Aaron was saying, one, not for a home, but for a larger business, it can be advantageous to install a battery for what's called peak shaving. So if you had, say, a school that used a lot of power in the middle of the day and not as much at night, they may be on a different schedule, not like residential, but something that charges them for demand. And so it can actually lower their bill just to put in a battery so that they can store up powder in the battery and then use that to offset their peak demand. Now you have to be really careful that that's actually going to end up paying for itself. But that can be one case where putting a battery in can be helpful. I don't know of any households that are on that kind of demand charge, so it would not, as Aaron said, really make any sense for a house. And also, just as a story, we have a friend with a boat on a dock, and he has, I think, just 2 solar panels on his dock. And again, I think Aaron's right that for a 1 or 2 panel installation, getting a contractor in there is going to be cost prohibitive. But if it's something that you can just do yourself, or hire a handyman and buy a couple panels off the web, that kind of thing can work really well, because it's a lot easier than trying to run power out the dock. So this is a picture of a little flat roof that we have, and let's see, this is what it looked like, I don't know, about 6 months after we put it in, where it's all blooming. It has a, whoops, I was just going to show you this. So this sort of shows the install process. We did this in 2005, so the roof has been in for 15 years, and it was probably the happiest home project we've ever done. It's just so beautiful, and it also has a lot of environmental benefits. Instead of peeling off and throwing off that asphalt every 10 years, I mean, it's completely exposed to the sun. The asphalt is protected by having soil on top of it, as well as the fact that the plants are soaking up the sun. We use a lot less air conditioning in that part of our living space, and it changes with the seasons. The birds come in there, the butterflies come in there. I only did it for the environmental reasons, but I work in my home office a lot. I'm sitting there now, and I can just turn and look out to this beautiful meadow. Whoops, didn't mean to go through all that. Anyway, so just for a quick look at what a green roof is, it takes probably a little longer to pay off than solar, because you really are looking for recoup of the cost for the next time that you would have installed that roof. But you can do it on any roof up to 45 degrees. It doesn't have to be flat. And it's just a really fun thing to do. You can do it on small parts of your roof or the whole roof. Having done this little part of our roof now, I wish that I'd been braver and had the whole back half of our house be a green roof and the whole front be solar. But this was what we did in the beginning, and it's really it's always a good draw in the solar tour that we have, not only solar but also a green roof. People are always fascinated with it, even if it's not something they're going to do.
Thank you. I love it. What did you say about watering?
We didn't put a watering system up there, and the first year we put it in, we left for 3 weeks in August when it happened to be about 90 degrees with no rain, and we came back and pretty much the whole thing was brown to the ground. And this was 6 weeks before we were going to be on NBC Nightly News with Brian Williams of showing off our green roof. So I pretty much totally freaked and called the installer, and he just said, just water it, it'll come right back. And I didn't believe him, but I pulled the hose out there and watered it. And after 3 weeks, you couldn't even tell, it came right back. After that, we installed a soaker hose system on it, which I would recommend doing that as part of the install rather than as a add-on the way we did it. But it really only needs water maybe twice a year, just those times when we have 3 weeks with no rain and it starts to get crispy fried. But it's sedum, it's a rock garden plant that's very tolerant of drought. I didn't show it, but there's a white layer in there, kind of like a diaper that absorbs water and helps the plants out, so that it's not like it needs watering all the time. And I'm horrible with plants, so I don't water things very well, but it needs water maybe twice a year in the really hot times.
Okay, thank you. Very inspiring. Do we have other questions? Let me just double check. I don't think that we do. So many opportunities for energy shade screens outside of windows, like on roofs, office window, reflective roofs, no more black shingles, etc. So those are great points. Do you want to go ahead and put in the chat box the PDF that you wanted to share? I did put in, Aaron, I did put in the URL for the solar co-op site, and I was about to try to put in your Norfolk project in the chat box as well, so people can key into that.
Great, thank you.
And so if I was interested, Aaron, in getting my neighborhood, which is in Fairfax County, involved, yet I can't have solar myself, say. How might I go about doing that? Just tell everybody, go check out the new program, or
Yeah.
try to rally neighbors together first, or?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd say there's two ways. You know, in this case, we have a co-op going on, which the Arlington group is open to Fairfax. So sharing the website, any materials about the co-op. Joining the co-op is free to join. We screen your roof. There's no obligation. So you think of it, the co-op is kind of like going with a solar installer off the street. The value with that is that you get a lower price, typically from the bulk purchase, and then you get our support through the process. So, you know, we're going to give a lot of information that really arms the consumer with the tools to make a decision. And the co-op could be a great fit, or it could not, but that's why it's voluntary. The other thing would be direct people to our membership program. We do have a paid membership program for folks that are interested in going outside of the co-op. Maybe, as I mentioned earlier, one is not available, or it's already ended, or it's just not within your time frame. We can help folks compare 3 different proposals, and again, give that support before and after. So those would be probably your 2, you know, main things, you know, action items. But, you know, feel free. I can also post my email address. Feel free to contact me if you have any questions too.
Yeah, it's not letting me slide my file into there, so I'm just going to put the website that has the PDF at it. And maybe you could email out that
I can.
handout. Okay.
I can email it. So if you'll send it over to me, I will email it out, you know, as a thank you. And I also have recorded this, so this may also be something that would be interesting. I can share it with my neighbors, let them learn as well.
Great.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I think that good. We've got Aaron's email address in there. Anything else you think? Sherry says thank you. Good to have you, Sherry. It's been a little while since I've seen you. Okay. Okay. So you can save your chat with the 3 little dots at the bottom of the chat. So if you want to save your chat, you can save your chat. And when the meeting is ended, or when you leave the meeting, it will download as a small text file. Then you'll have those links for yourself. Okay, so do we have everything in there now? Or it looks like Ruth still.
I was just sending an email to you.
Yeah.
I'm done with
Okay, good.
stuff in the
All
chat.
right, well, let's say goodbye. Thank you so much. Very inspiring. Let's go solar, and let's all sign up for the Women's Summit.
All right.
Take care.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you.
All
Okay,
right.
bye-bye.
Bye.